December 17, 1944, 4:30 hours, Bastogne, Belgium, Private First Class. Thomas Tommy Harker, 101st Airborne Division, watched a soldier in an American uniform tie his boots in the pre-dawn darkness of a makeshift command post. Something was wrong. The man's fingers moved in a pattern Tommy had never seen in 2 years of Army life, crossing the laces over the top, then looping underneath in a way that seemed backward, European. The man wore the uniform, he had the rank insignia, he carried the right rifle, but those fingers told a different story. Before we continue with Tommy Harker's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now, back to Bastogne, December 17, 1944, where Tommy Harker was about to make an observation that would save dozens of American lives. The Battle of the Bulge had erupted just the day before. Hitler's last major offensive in the West, Operation Wacht am Rhein, had caught Allied forces completely by surprise. Along an 85-mile front through the Ardennes forest, 200 U-Hausen German troops and 1 the U-Hausen tanks had smashed through thinly defended American positions. The 101st Airborne, including Tommy's company, had been rushed to the critical crossroads town of Bastogne to hold it at all costs. But the Germans had done something unprecedented. Among their assault forces, they had inserted English-speaking commandos wearing American uniforms, driving captured American jeeps, carrying American weapons. Operation Greif. Commanded by SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, these infiltrators had one mission: create chaos behind American lines, misdirect traffic, cut communication wires, change road signs, spread false orders, and assassinate high-ranking officers. Tommy Harker was 22 years old, from a textile mill town in North Carolina called Kannapolis. 5'8", 140 pounds, with hands that were small for a man but quick and observant. Before the war, he'd worked in his father's shoe repair shop on Main Street, resoling boots and Oxfords 6 days a week. He'd enlisted 3 days after Pearl Harbor, on his 20th birthday. His father had shaken his hand without a word, then shown him how to properly lace combat boots using the Army's standard crisscross method. "You'll be doing this in the dark, in the cold, in the rain," his father had said. Muscle memory matters. 2 years later, that muscle memory would become the difference between life and death. The man Tommy was watching called himself Technical Sergeant Robert Mitchell, 28th Infantry Division. He claimed his unit had been overrun near Clairvaux, that he'd fought his way south to rejoin American lines. His story was plausible. Hundreds of scattered soldiers were stumbling into Bastogne from shattered units. The 28th Infantry had indeed been devastated in the initial German assault, losing over 6,000 men in 48 hours. But Tommy couldn't stop watching the way Mitchell tied his boots. Between December 16th and December 24th, 1944, German infiltrators in American uniforms created havoc throughout the Ardennes. They redirected entire convoys down wrong roads. They changed road signs, sending reinforcements away from critical positions instead of toward them. They cut telephone lines at division headquarters. At least 18 American officers were fired upon by men they believed were friendly troops. 8 were killed. The paranoia became so severe that American soldiers began stopping each other at checkpoints, demanding passwords, asking questions only Americans would know. Who won the World Series? What's the capital of Illinois? Who's married to Betty Grable? But Otto Skorzeny's men had prepared for this. They'd studied American culture, memorized baseball statistics, learned regional accents. They knew Mickey Mouse's girlfriend was Minnie. They knew the Chicago Cubs played at Wrigley Field. They could recite the Pledge of Allegiance without hesitation. What they hadn't studied was how American soldiers tied their boots in the dark. Tommy's best friend had been Corporal James Jimmy Castellano from the Bronx, a wiry Italian kid with a gift for spotting things others missed. Jimmy wanted to be a detective after the war, maybe join the NYPD like his uncle. He and Tommy had made plans. Jimmy would handle the investigations. Tommy would run a shoe shop. Because cops need their shoes fixed, right? They'd shaken hands on it the night before the jump into Normandy. Jimmy had died on December 16th, the first day of the German offensive. A machine gun burst through the chest while trying to establish a defensive position outside Bastogne. He'd lived for 7 minutes, long enough to tell Tommy, "Watch everything. The small things, that's how you stay alive." Then he was gone. Tommy had been watching everything since, and now, watching Technical Sergeant Mitchell tie his boots, Tommy saw the small thing that didn't fit. American soldiers, every single one Tommy had served with across 2 years and 3 countries, tied their boots the same way. The army way. The efficient way. You crossed the laces over the top, pulled them tight through the next set of eyelets from underneath, crossed them over the top again. Repeat until you reach the ankle, then a standard bow knot. Tuck the loops under the laces to keep them from snagging. It was fast, it was reliable. It was what you did without thinking after you'd done it. 1 ISO times in basic training, another 2 show times in combat. Mitchell was using what Tommy recognized as the European Ian knot method, crossing the laces differently, looping them through from opposite directions. It was actually faster once you learned it, which was probably why he'd defaulted to it in the stress and darkness. But no American soldier knew it. No American boot camp taught it. Tommy's pulse accelerated. He glanced at Mitchell's uniform more carefully now. The combat boots were correct. Standard M1943 brown leather boots. The wool trousers had the right color, the right cut. The M1941 field jacket was authentic, complete with proper 28th Infantry Division shoulder patch, the red keystone of Pennsylvania's National Guard. But there were microscopic tells now that Tommy knew what to look for. The field jacket's buttons caught the light wrong. They were slightly too shiny, probably German-made replacements. The wool trousers had been hemmed recently, the thread color just a shade off. And Mitchell's dog tags, visible at his neck, hung on a chain that was too new, too bright. American dog tags got dull fast in combat conditions. These looked like they'd been issued yesterday. Tommy faced an impossible decision. If he was wrong, he'd be accusing an exhausted, traumatized American soldier of being a German spy. In the chaos of the Bulge, with nerves stretched to breaking, false accusations were flying everywhere. 3 American soldiers had already been temporarily detained by paranoid officers in the past 24 hours. The humiliation, the lost time, the damaged trust, all serious consequences. But if Tommy was right and said nothing, Mitchell would have free access to the command post. He could hear orders being given. He could see maps showing defensive positions. He could identify which officers were coordinating the defense. At worst, he could kill those officers. At best, he could report everything he learned back to German intelligence. Tommy thought about Jimmy Castellano. Watch everything, the small things. He stood up, walked slowly across the room, and approached Lieutenant Frank Morrison, a platoon leader from Kentucky who Tommy had served under since Normandy. Morrison was exhausted, unshaven, reviewing a map by candlelight. Tommy leaned in close. "Sir, I need to speak with you, outside, right now." Morrison looked up, annoyed. "Private, I'm kind of busy planning how to not get overrun by the entire German army." "Sir, it's about the sergeant who came in an hour ago, Mitchell." Something in Tommy's voice made Morrison stand up. They stepped outside into the frozen darkness. Tommy could see his breath in the air. The temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit. "Talk," Morrison said. "Sir, I think he's German." Morrison stared at him. "Based on what, Private? Because I'm not arresting a soldier from the 28th Infantry on a hunch." "His shoelaces, sir." "His what?" Tommy explained. "The European method. The 2 shiny buttons, the 2 new dog tags, the hemmed trousers." Morrison listened without interrupting. When Tommy finished, Morrison was quiet for 15 seconds. "You're sure about the laces?" "Yes, sir. My father ran a shoe shop. I've tied boots and watched boots get tied my entire life. No American GI ties his laces that way. Nobody." Morrison nodded slowly. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back inside and act natural. I'm going to get the MPs and Captain Edwards. We're going to question Mitchell about things only an American would know. If he passes, you apologize to him yourself. If he doesn't... Morrison didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. German spies in American uniforms were executed. 20 minutes later, Captain Robert Edwards entered the command post with 2 military police sergeants. Edwards was a West Point graduate, 29 years old, from Minnesota. He'd fought at Omaha Beach and across France. He had a reputation for being smart and careful. "Sergeant Mitchell," Edwards said casually, "need to verify your identity. Standard procedure with everyone coming in from scattered units. You understand?" "Of course, sir." Mitchell's English was perfect. Midwestern accent, maybe Ohio or Indiana. No trace of German. "What's the capital of Nebraska?" Edwards asked. "Lincoln, sir." "Who won the 1943 World Series?" "Yankees over the Cardinals, 4-1. "What year did Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs?" "1927, sir." Edwards nodded. These were the standard questions. Mitchell had answered them all correctly without hesitation. He'd been trained well. Then Edwards shifted. "What year did your division, the 28th Infantry, deploy to Europe?" "October 1943, sir. Landed in Wales, moved to England, crossed to France in July 1944. "And your regimental commander?" "Colonel James Rudder, sir." Mitchell rattled off the name confidently, except it was wrong. Colonel James Earl Rudder commanded the 2nd Ranger Battalion, not anything in the 28th Infantry. The 28th Infantry Division's 110th Regiment was commanded by Colonel Hurley Fuller. Mitchell had conflated 2 different units. Edwards' expression didn't change. "And where exactly were you when the German attack started on December 16th? "Clairvaux, sir. Luxembourg. We were..." "Show me on the map." Edwards unfolded a tactical map on the table. Mitchell stepped forward and pointed without hesitation to Clairvaux. He knew where it was. That wasn't the test. "Take off your boots," Edwards said suddenly. "Sir, your boots. Take them off. I want to see if you've got trench foot. We're checking everyone." It was a lie, but a plausible one. Trench foot was epidemic in the Ardennes winter. Mitchell hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then sat down and began unlacing his boots. He used the same European method to unlace them. Quick, efficient, automatic. The muscle memory of 10 Eero-Zeren repetitions. Edwards glanced at Tommy, then back at Mitchell. "Sergeant, how long have you been in the Army?" "Since May 1942, sir. Enlisted in Cleveland." "And they taught you to tie your boots like that in basic training?" "Sir?" Mitchell's hands froze. "The way you're unlacing them right now, that's not how the U.S. Army teaches bootlacing. That's not how any American soldier I've ever met ties his boots." The room went absolutely silent. Mitchell's face remained neutral, but Tommy saw his shoulders tense. The 2 MPs moved slightly, hands drifting toward their sidearms. "I don't know what you mean, sir," Mitchell said carefully. "Then humor me," Edwards said. "Take them off completely, then put them back on and lace them. Show me how you learned it in basic training. At Camp Wheeler, right? That's where 28th Infantry replacements trained, so show me the Camp Wheeler method." Mitchell looked at the boots in his hands. He looked at Edwards. He looked at the 2 MPs, and in that instant everyone in the room knew. Mitchell's hand moved toward the pistol at his belt, an M19 Lonley 1 that looked American, but probably wasn't. He never reached it. The 2 MPs had their .45s out and aimed at his head in less than a second. "Don't," one of them said quietly. Mitchell's hand stopped. He raised both hands slowly. "Stand up," Edwards commanded. "Slow." Mitchell stood. The MPs moved in, one disarming him while the other kept a pistol pressed to his spine. They found a German Walther P-38 in an ankle holster, under his trouser leg. They found a map with American defensive positions marked in pencil. They found a notebook with frequency numbers for American radio communications. And when they checked his actual dog tags more carefully, they found they were German-made forgeries. The embossing was wrong. The metal composition was wrong. Under close inspection, they weren't even close. But without the shoelaces, no one would have looked closely enough to notice. Mitchell, His real name was Oberscharführer Wilhelm Schmidt of the 1st SS Panzer Division, was interrogated over the next 6 hours. He admitted to being part of Operation Greif. He provided information about 14 other infiltrators operating in American uniforms around Bastogne. By nightfall on December 17th, military police had arrested 7 of them. 3 more were killed trying to escape. The remaining 4 were never found. The information Mitchell provided under interrogation revealed that German intelligence knew far more about American defensive positions than anyone had realized. They had the locations of ammunition dumps, fuel depots, medical stations. They knew which roads were usable for armor and which weren't. They knew the call signs and frequencies of American radio networks. The only thing they hadn't known was that small details, tiny habits of everyday life, could give them away. Tommy Harker received no medal for his observation. There was no ceremony, no mention in official reports. Captain Edwards wrote a brief commendation that went into Tommy's service record, noting his alertness and attention to detail in identifying an enemy infiltrator. That was all. Tommy survived the siege of Bastogne, which lasted until December 26th, when Patton's Third Army broke through to relieve the surrounded 101st Airborne. He fought across Germany in 1945, was present at the liberation of a concentration camp substation near Landsberg, and was in Austria when the war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. He came home to Kannapolis in December 1945, aged 23, and went back to work in his father's shoe shop. He married a local girl named Dorothy Mills in 1947. They had 3 children. He never talked about the war, not even to Dorothy, except to say he'd been in Belgium and Germany and had been lucky to survive. Tommy ran the shoe shop after his father retired in 1953. He was known in town as a meticulous craftsman who took pride in his work. He could look at how someone walked and tell you exactly which part of their shoe sole would wear out first. He could spot a poorly tied shoe from across the street. In 1989, a military historian named Dr. Sarah Chen was researching Operation Greif for a book about German special operations. She was going through thousands of pages of declassified counterintelligence corps reports when she found a mention of PFC Thomas Harker, 101st Airborne, who had identified an infiltrator through observation of non-standard bootlacing technique. Dr. Chen tracked Tommy down to Kannapolis. He was 67 years old, still running the shoe shop, though his son had taken over most of the daily operations. She interviewed him in the back room, surrounded by leather and tools and the smell of shoe polish. "I just watched how he tied his boots," Tommy told her. "My daddy taught me to notice things like that. Said the way a man treats his shoes tells you about how he treats everything else. I guess the Germans didn't think about teaching their spies something that small." "Do you know how many lives you might have saved?" Dr. Chen asked. Tommy shrugged. "I didn't save anyone. I just saw something that didn't fit and told my lieutenant. He's the one who handled it." The report says the infiltrator had a map showing ammunition depot locations. If he'd reported those back to German artillery. "Ma'am, a lot of people did a lot of things during that war. I just happened to notice someone's shoelaces. That's all." Dr. Chen included Tommy's story in her book, The Devil's Brigade, Otto Skorzeny and Operation Greif, published in 1992. It occupied 3 pages in a 400-page book. Tommy received a complimentary copy in the mail. He read it once, thanked Dr. Chen in a polite letter, and put the book on a shelf in his living room. Thomas Harker died in June 2003, age 81, of heart failure. His obituary in the Kannapolis Daily Independent mentioned his 43 years running Harker's shoe repair, his membership in the First Baptist Church, and his service in the 101st Airborne during World War II. It did not mention Operation Greif, or Wilhelm Schmidt, or the shoelaces that saved dozens of American lives during the Battle of the Bulge. His funeral was attended by 76 people. The local VFW post provided an honor guard. 3 of his grandchildren spoke about his kindness, his work ethic, his love of family. None of them knew the full story of December 17, 1944. Today, there is no memorial to Tommy Harker. No plaque, no monument, no highway named in his honor. The shoe shop closed in 2007 when his son retired. The building is now a cell phone store. but in the archives of the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps, in a file marked Operation Greif-Bastogne Sector, there is a report dated December 18, 1944. It describes the arrest and interrogation of Wilhelm Schmidt, German infiltrator, and it credits the initial identification to PFC Harker's observation of suspect's bootlacing technique, non-standard for U.S. Army. 7 lines in a forgotten report. That's all that remains of the moment when a shoe repairman's son from North Carolina noticed something no one else saw and acted on it, and saved lives because he understood that in war, as in everything else, it's the small details that matter most. If this story moved you, hit that like button to help us share these forgotten stories of World War II. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another account of the ordinary men who did extraordinary things. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if anyone in your family served. Tell us which World War II story you'd like to hear next. These men didn't fight for glory. They fought for each other. The least we can do is remember them. Thank you for keeping their memory alive.